You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Opperman, and I'll be your host for Dairy Voice, the podcast produced by Dairy Business News. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important nutrients that cows need, and that's water. When we think about nutrition for dairy cows, oftentimes we think about things other than water. We think about forage quality, metabolizable protein, starch, any other number of aspects of what cows eat, but often we look past what cows drink. Cows can drink up to 50 gallons of water each day and much more when they're under heat stress. So that makes it important for them to get as much cool, clear water as they can. And here to tell us more about the importance of water in a cow's diet is Dr. David Kolb, who is the owner, Chief Veterinary and Financial Officer with Acepsis. Welcome, Dave.
Hello.
Before we get started, Dave, can you tell us a little bit about your background and about Acepsis and what your company does?
My background is I grew up on a dairy farm and always wanted to be a dairy veterinarian. That was the get-go from like 8th grade. I achieved that goal, and that would be about 38 years ago. And so I've been a large animal veterinarian ever since. So my background in the veterinary field has been with Lodi Veterinary Care, larger practice just north of Madison, Wisconsin, deals with dairy cows, obviously, but we have a large practice, like 28 veterinarians, over 100 employees. That's reaching across all the veterinary field. We have a large part of our practice that's go to dairy cows. That's my background. Had a lot of experience as a large animal veterinarian and good experience in my career.
Explain a little bit about Acepsis and
Yeah.
what your company does too.
As being a large animal veterinarian, our goal is always to limit the amount of disease that our dairy animals see. And so as time went on, it became clear that you can't always vaccinate your way out of a problem. You can't always apply medicine to a problem and get a good result. I can recall one particular experience where we dealt with a high morbidity rate or a lot of calf diarrhea, and eventually came to the point where we accepted that almost every calf was going to get diarrhea. You know, you would look at the maternity pen, you looked at everything in their management, and it was spectacular. Everything looked clean. What we found, however, is until we applied sanitation or hygiene to the problem, we could not get our way out of this calf diarrhea problem. With that in mind, we discovered that if we applied hygiene or sanitation, we were able to eliminate the problem, or not eliminate, but greatly reduce the amount of calf diarrhea we had. So got very interested in hygiene. About 10 years ago, my partner and I started this business. He was big into the ag chemical side of the business, and we formed a company focused on hygiene. It has led us down roads that I didn't expect it to, but that's how the business actually started. And we were focused on calf areas and how you apply hygiene to that. As we went along, other opportunities or challenges became available or showed what we might want to have with other areas of hygiene. And one of those areas was the water trough. Opened a can of worms and also realized that the water trough is a great disseminator of pathogens and disease.
With over 85 projects, California Bioenergy is without a doubt one of the leading developers of anaerobic digesters for dairy farms in the United States. Since 2006, CalBio has been forming successful partnerships with dairy farmers to create digesters that are built to last. Our CalBio team has the expertise to help lead you through the entire development process. From project design and engineering to credit generation and the day-to-day operations. With subsidiaries in the Northwest, Midwest, and Southwest, CalBio is ready to partner with dairy farmers across the country. Learn more at calbioenergy.com.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that farmers often overlook is just the importance of quality water. And let's talk a little bit about that. And obviously, it's an obvious question, but again, it's often overlooked. Why is water so important to cow nutrition and health?
A lot of times, as veterinarians, as producers, we check the quality of water, and we do that by analyzing whether it's hard or soft water, whether there's minerals or iron in the water. That's basically what we have been talking about for years. However, there's a lot more happening at the water trough than just the source of the water. We have been kind of analyzing all the water. I think the classic symptom that we see is a cow with respiratory disease. They're kind of have a foamy mouth, they're breathing hard, and they hang right over the water trough and drip all those pathogens into the water trough. Every other animal that comes across that water trough to take a drink will be exposed to those pathogens. By treating the water trough, we have minimized some of that transfer of disease. It's not a concept that anybody has been talking about. I went through veterinary school. Nobody talked about the water trough and its mechanism for disease transmission. And we still don't really do that today. But I feel like people really analyze how their cattle go to the water trough, even when they're sick, and spread all those infectious particles in the water trough. It will be an eye opener for most producers.
You know, when I was growing up, the idea of cleaning a water trough meant just throwing a couple of bullhead in the trough and they would take care of, eating any of the residues and whatnot were in the water. So I guess we're kind of moved past that. You talk about an ideal environment for growth of pathogens. What sort of organisms and other contaminants can we find in water that could impact cow health?
It's a moist environment, which bacteria, viruses love. There's something that also happens on the side of a water trough, and we're all experienced by sticking our finger within the water trough and just sliding our finger along the side of it, and you feel that slime. That slime is a biofilm, and that's multiple bacteria, algae growth along that side of the wall of the water trough, and that's an excellent place for pathogens to hide. They love that area. They thrive there. And if we're having that biofilm buildup, you can bet your life that there will be some not good bacteria in there also. So there'll be Salmonella, E. coli, all those things that would come to a cow. If they are in a good immune state, they might be able to fight it off. But if they're stressed, that's when the disease will take them on and they won't be able to fight it off. So we want to prevent them being exposed to those pathogens.
And even beyond pathogens, water does carry nutrients, right? I mean, I know when I used to talk about transition rations, we encourage producers to test their water for things like chloride and so forth, so they could balance rations accordingly. Does that have much of an impact or not?
It certainly does. That is traditionally all we have done in evaluating water for our dairies. That's all important, but my view is that's only a minor part of water quality today. Certainly, if there's a lot of minerals, if your source water has a lot of minerals in it, being able to provide a water treatment to that kind of water is more difficult. And sometimes we have to condition the water with water softeners and what have you to try and minimize a lot of those minerals. and the effect that they might have on rumen nutrition, for sure.
So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of cause and effect. So if I'm a producer, how do I know if I have a water quality problem? It's probably not something that just stands up and raises its hand and said, "Hey, you have a water quality problem." But what are some of the signs that a producer might be able to see to realize that they might have an issue?
And they're all subtle signs. And in fact, when we do a water treatment program, we don't say all your problems will just magically go away. That's not the effect we see, but we do see that all those on the margin, those things that a dairy cow sees when it drinks water, pathogens, all that exposure comes at a cost. That cost is something that they have to use their immune system to fight. When you see that happen, there'll be digestive upsets. There'll be things like unexplained, everything in the parlor looks good from a milk quality standpoint, or we're just not being able to get that milk quality that we're looking for. And the cows are challenged by pathogens within the water trough. And if we minimize those pathogens, we'll see better milk quality. And that's not something that I have a good science-based. I think about it, and why does that happen? I think it's just because cows are exposed to so many pathogens all day long that if you can minimize those pathogens, they're just a healthier animal and they're not having to fight everything off.
So it really comes down to immune function, right? It's so if you're not impacting the immune system, that helps the cow's ability to, protect itself and fight off other pathogens, right?
That's correct. I think cows are constantly, the way we keep them now, we try and keep them as comfortable as possible.
Mhm.
Certainly everything on a dairy has to be just perfect for them to perform like we'd like them to perform. And this is just another additive effect. If we minimize the amount of pathogens they get exposed to, they they will perform for us in a much better fashion. We'll just see better milk quality, less illness, less exposure to the pathogens.
Now, if I'm a producer and I know I have a problem, or I think that there's an issue with water quality, kind of walk us through how I can make changes or make sure that I'm delivering clean water to my milking herd.
Yeah, I think it's good practice always to not ignore the water trough. We should be cleaning those out at least twice a week, trying to eliminate that biofilm that builds up on the water trough side, scrub them out, offer clean water. One thing that we always tend to see is as soon as we clean the water trough, you'll have cows get up out of that freestall and walk right over and drink that clean, fresh water. They really go after that. We want to have a cleaning program in place. With our water treatment system, we would like to see us have an ORP level in the 5 to 600 range. That ORP level is a level of oxidation potential, and that is what kills the organisms if we apply a water treatment program. It's something different than we've all been looking at in the past, but if we can keep that ORP level up, the biofilm residual doesn't, our water trough cleaning program is much easier. It eliminates that biofilm. You'll have less slime, less buildup, easier to clean water trough.
Talk a little bit about your system and how that helps deliver clean water to cows.
We use a chlorine dioxide based water treatment system. The way that system would work is it evaluates or measures the amount of water going to the dairy cows. I can say that not everybody has a meter on the water that goes to the dairy cows, but I think they should. If there's a problem, that's another area that we need to analyze and monitor so that we're providing as much fresh water as the cows are desiring for optimal production. We haven't always insisted that we know exactly to the pound or to the ounce level of what we're feeding our cows, but we don't know to the ounce level what the cows are drinking. And so that's a big aspect of bringing a water treatment system in place. We actually know what the cows on average are drinking, and it can give us some preliminary evidence that there might be a problem if they back off in the drinking. Also, by treating the water, we are providing, there's no research data that says the cows need to drink this much water to be healthy. We would like them to have access to the cleanest, most pure water that they can consume.
That's especially important coming up because eventually it's going to get hot up here in Wisconsin, and cows are going to be impacted by heat stress. What can producers do to make sure cows have ample access to fresh water whenever they need it, especially in this period of hot weather?
Interestingly, we have been analyzing how much water cows drink in various locations of the barn. It does appear that there might be some differences, that cows like to have a certain temperature of water. They like an easy access from where they're laying in their stall, easy access to the water trough. But as temperatures decline in the wintertime, kind of taking you down a different path, but as cows confront the cold weather, they like a certain temperature of water. If that water temperature goes low, it's just above freezing, they would prefer a water temperature that's closer to 50 degrees rather than close to freezing. And so they'll seek out water that stays at that level. Water coming out of the well generally is about that level. A lot of dairies use second use water, water that comes out of the plate cooler, gets collected and then reused and fed to cows. And that water is slightly conditioned to be a little warmer. They generally like water, not in the freezing temperature, but in that 50-degree range.
Dave, we talked a lot about water, and I appreciate you offering insights into, this nutrient that is often overlooked on dairy farms, but is critical to animal health and productivity. Is there anything else that we need to cover today that we haven't talked about?
I would just like to reiterate that pathogens are being constantly thrown at our dairy cows. And if we can keep the level of the pathogens down, bad bacteria, we'll have a much healthier herd, more productive herd.
And there's so many factors that go into that. David, if somebody wanted to learn more about your company, Acepsis, where would they find that?
We have a website. It's acepsis.com, and that there's a little play on words there. Acepsis is generally ASESPIS, but we have changed that S to a C, so it's acepsis.com with a C. So if they're seeking out a website, we have a lot of good material on that website, and they can download tons of information. Certainly, if they'd like to follow up with myself, my email is drdavidkolb@acepsis.com.
Thanks for that information, Dave, and thanks for your insights today. And this has been another episode of Dairy Voice. This has been Mike Opperman for Dairy Voice from Dairy Business News.